For 7 years, I worked for a local nonprofit that provides mentoring to at-risk youth in the community. During that time, a good friend of mine was mentoring a young man who was 16 years old. This young man grew up in a home of poverty, domestic violence, and chaos. And eventually, this home became so chaotic that it made the most sense for this young man to come and move in with my friend. Now, after he moved in, it became very apparent that he had struggles. Some of those were academic. And so together, they worked really hard. They set a goal to get straight A's in the next semester. They spent most of their evenings working really hard, challenging those things that he had not learned in his life, those disciplines about study skills and how to work hard academically. So because of these struggles, historically in his academic career, he'd probably had more D's and F's than he had had other grades. So they worked and they worked and they worked till the end of the semester. At the end of the semester, he had all A's and one B. That B was an 89.5. So my friend said, hey, will you go and just ask the teacher for an opportunity to do extra credit? So this young man did and reported back to my friend, and he said, sorry, the teacher said no. So my friend, doing what most of us would do, said, hey, I'll set up a meeting with the teacher. Maybe he doesn't really understand the context. Maybe he doesn't know how hard you've worked. So he set up a meeting with the teacher, went and sat with the teacher, kind of said the same thing. Hey, could this young man just have an opportunity to do an extra credit project? He'll do whatever you want him to do. Just, man, if he could get straight A's, this would change the way that he views academics. So, while they were meeting, the teacher said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And the reason that he gave was that because that would not be fair to the other students in the class. Now, I'm guessing many of you had the same reaction to that I did at the time. And all I could think of in the moment, and my friend was right there with me, is, you really think his life is fair? You see, that's the problem with fairness. It has a massive limitation in the work that we're trying to accomplish on a daily basis. The fairness approach has a fatal flaw. It assumes that we all start from the same place, which is simply not true. It prevents the people that we desire to serve and to see their lives change, transition from crisis to thriving. So what we're looking for is not equality. Equality says that all things are equal among all individuals. But what we're looking for is equity. Equity is getting what we need to survive or succeed based on where we are and where we want to go. In 2006, a movie came out called The Pursuit of Happiness. It's based on a true story of a man named Christopher Gardner. Gardner invested all of his money in a business that failed. As a result, he lost all of his money, his wife left him, and he ended up homeless on the street with his son. So while this movie was out, my wife and one of her friends went to go see it. And following the movie, they're kind of talking about what they saw and what they're thinking and processing that. And my wife's friend said, you know, the movie's compelling, but when you make bad business decisions and bad financial investments, you end up homeless. That's life. And in that moment, my wife had an epiphany. You see, for her life, that just wasn't true. He was 2 decisions away from homelessness. And in her life, she was an infinite number of decisions away from homelessness. She could have done all of those same things and never had the same result. because, honestly, her safety net was just too large. So that's true for so many of us, I think. And if we look deeper into our experience of life, there are a lot of things we didn't earn. We didn't earn the family that we were born into. We didn't earn the cognitive ability that we were born with. Many didn't earn the positive life skills that they were taught by their parents and by their environment, while others begin from a very different place in life. My wife's insight was profound and insightful and impactful, but it wasn't enough. I hope that everyone here has experiences like that of insight and recognizing that things are different for different people and their paradigms begin to shift as a part of that. But insight doesn't always lead to change. It requires action. I think in my work, I've identified two big things that really impact our experience to put this insight that we gain into action and to move closer towards equity. If you're going to move towards equity, you must have understanding. And understanding is not obtained without two factors, I believe. The first is exposure, and the second is relationship. Are you okay with exposing yourself to people who live differently than you? Do you have a relationship with people who see the world differently? Because understanding comes from being in spaces where I am not the majority and I feel uncomfortable. Because that gives me the ability to see things that are different from the way that I view them, to build relationships with people who think differently than me, and lead to the place of understanding, and we could also say empathy. The second is that we need to use our influence to create bridges. One of the best actions that we can do is to take an inventory of our influence. We all have it, and it's a great exercise to evaluate how we are currently using it. The great thing about influence is that it spans all people and all life stages. Maybe it's the college student who doesn't have a ton of money, but they've got a lot of time. Or maybe it's the business owner or the manager who has the ability to give someone a chance at a job or a living wage. In order to create bridges, it takes individuals with power and influence shifting the way that we think, the way that we see people, and the way that we measure success. Are we okay with changing the way that we approach things? Are we okay with putting ourselves in uncomfortable situations where people think and experience life different than us? Are we willing to engage in relationships with people who have different views than us? I know this looks different for every person. We're all different stages of our journey of helping. But are we willing to step outside of ourselves and then ask ourselves, am I moving closer to equity? So we've talked about what this individual process looks like for each of us. And it's about insight, and it's about understanding these things and putting them in practice. But let's talk for a second about what this looks like for communities. Equitable communities require three components working together. Individuals have to have the resources that they need available to them. Individuals have to have some sort of relationship to connect. And there has to be a system that can absorb individuals when they move towards thriving. Not long ago, one of our community liaisons was driving down the road. She pulled up to an intersection and saw a young woman holding a sign. The community liaison got the attention of the young woman and called her over to her car. She said, "Hey, I don't have any cash, but here's my business card. I can get you any resource that you need. Just get back in touch with me." The young woman took the card and quickly went back to her spot. Not long after, the community liaison was contacted by the young woman. She had found herself traveling with her boyfriend who left town without her. She was in a new place. She had no idea what to do, no idea where to go, and knew no one. She was all alone, but she needed everything. Our community liaison was able to be a familiar face in the community to this young lady, while simultaneously getting her connected to the resources that she needed. Because of systemic changes that are happening in our community, she was also able to obtain housing and employment as a result of this process. Because these three factors were working together in this situation, the young woman was able to get what she needed. She's still working towards thriving, but she's not alone. Communities are changed by the people in them. So let's ask ourselves, are we as individuals and communities moving closer to equity? Thank you.